My name is Ed Lucero. I have a technology and design background, so I studied architecture and computer science. I've done startups in New York, in Korea, in China, currently in Silicon Valley now, where I'm the VP of technology for a company called ChatLoud. ChatLoud focuses on mobile messaging for businesses. I also do some projects personally which really focus on early learning and education. So it's a way for me to keep get my hands dirty in actual coding. Okay, let's start with a napkin sketch, right? You have an idea. And on hot day, people love ice cream. So I think I'm going to get into the ice cream business, but I'm going to innovate. I'm going to get ice cream to people through a drone, and I can get it to them in 2 minutes because of this drone. So that's my business idea, and I start creating a business plan. So I realize I need an app so people can order. I need a drone. I need some ice cream. I need a factory. I need a lot of people to sort of help me build these things and to operate these things. So I get my business plan. I do some calculations. I realize I need $10 million investment. I do some more calculations, and I argue that in 10 years, I can return $100 billion on the investment. So this looks great. So what we assume is that we'll start with our $10 million. We have our goal, and step by step, we achieve our goals, and this is how business works. That's not true at all. Usually what happens is you start and you bootstrap, which means you have no money, and you don't go in a straight line. You go through different zigs and zags where you raise money, you spend money, you make some sales, you lose some sales, you get some co-founders, you lose some co-founders. You have a partner that turns into a competitor. You may need to pivot before you really see some sales happen, and you achieve a goal. But it's not even the goal that you set out to achieve. It could be something totally different. It's really common that the goal that you thought you were going after is not really the goal, though your vision may retain throughout. Well, what can we learn from here? A few things. One, be able to start with no funds, right? That's what's called bootstrapping. You must learn quickly and adapt constantly. You're evolving and adapting all the time. And what can help you is to find data that informs your next move. Entrepreneurs get very comfortable about making decisions with incomplete information. At the same time, you're trying to get as much data as possible. And so it looks like, well, how do you create a process out of this very confusing steps? Seems like there is no process, it's all luck. Well, actually, Silicon Valley has looked at this quite a lot, and you may hear this term lean startup. You also might hear a term called agile development. And these are kind of twins. Agile development might be looking more at software development, but basically the concepts of these two terms or tenets are the same. Sometimes they're called the lean movement or agile movement because it's not so much that you follow these rules strictly, but that you understand the concept behind them. And the concept is basically this. You start with an idea. You take that idea, you build a product. You take that product and you collect sacks of money. No, actually you collect data. Right? And you take that data and you refine your idea. And through this idea, you are building your product, and from product to data, you are measuring. You're collecting data, and from that data, you are learning, and what you're learning applies to that core idea. Other things to note about this is that one complete loop of this is something that you're going to try to complete very quickly in relative terms. So it's not a 10-year plan. Actually, people talk about a sprint. And the reason why it's called a sprint is because it's very quick. You go through these 3 cycles very quickly. Commonly 1 week, could be 4 weeks. 2 weeks is pretty common. And you're doing this over and over again in what's called an iteration. Why is it called iteration? Because you're doing it again and again and again. And each time you are refining your idea. And what you'll see common in software, for example, is you'll hear about a 1.0, a 2.0, a 1.1, a 1.2, 1.3, and so on and so forth, where each loop through the refined idea to building that into your product to collecting data from that is another version up, and that's an iteration. And you keep going through this until you reach what's called product market fit. You are searching for product market fit. What you're trying to do is find out when customers respond to that. And that's really what product market fit means your product is resonating with the market, and they're sort of two puzzles sort of matched up. Let's look at that first idea. Going from the idea to the product. Essentially, we're building. Well, what is it that we're building? Are we building that big factory that's going to take 10 years? Well, we talked about the sprint. We talked about it being, in this case, 2 weeks. Well, we certainly can't build our factory and have a drone army in 2 weeks. Um, what we're actually doing, especially for the first round, is looking at an MVP. MVP stands for minimal viable product. What is it? Well, there's a product here, so what product can I build, right? There's that minimal word, so it's the smallest amount of features, right? So it's a product with the smallest amount of features that is usable, right? It's viable, means that essentially that the customer can hold it, the customer can interact with it, right? And what's really going on is you're trying to understand the customer very quickly. A lot of times you make an assumption about what the customer needs or wants or how they want it and how they want it purchase it. And you want to figure out if you're right or wrong very quickly, or what part of it that you're right or wrong very quickly. By doing this in 2 weeks or 3 months, several sprints, but within a relative short amount of time, you want to see whether or not it's working or what's not working, and correct that. In the case of the ice cream business, we talked about, well, okay, we need an app. So if I'm going to make it smaller, let's say we don't launch on all the platforms, we just launch on Android or something like that. We need some drones. Let's not get 100. Let's just get 2. And that's our minimal viable product, our 5. And that big factory, well, we don't need a big factory right away. We need a small factory. And this is our minimal viable product, right? It's skinned down. Actually, when I think about it, this will still take a 6 to 1 years before I get this part. That Android app's going to take me 3 months. Drones are going to take me 6. So this is not a minimal viable product, right? It's not scaled small enough, right? Um, how can we test the core tenets of our thesis without going this far? How can we do it in 2 weeks? So you say, oh, I'm a good programmer. I think I could build an Android app, and if it's just one flavor and one button, there's not a lot of features. You just press that button on Android and it gives you vanilla ice cream. I think I can do that. And I can't get the drones within that time or program the drones or understand how to deliver it, but I can get cars. I can get a few. I can hire a few guys with cars. I can even do it through Uber. So we're gonna budget for 4 cars that can deliver this. And it's not really about the drones anyway. It's about delivering ice cream very quickly, and cars can do that. And the way I can do that is to scale my territory. So to say, hey, we're only going to deliver within 4 blocks of my house because my house is the factory where we store the ice cream in the refrigerator. So that's my minimal viable product, and that's what I'm going to go with. Well, this still looks like it's going to take me a month, maybe 2 months, and then I find out that insurance on these cars are going to cost, and they're not. It's hard to get them here on time, and other issues there. So too problematic again. That's not my minimal viable product. How can I make this even? How can I test some basic parts of my vision without going this far? Well, say, well, you know what? I'm not even going to build an app. I'm going to use a mobile messaging platform like WhatsApp or iMessage or WeChat. And basically, you're going to send me a message, and from that message, I'm going to deliver you ice cream. And I'm not going to use cars. I'm going to actually use bicycles. I'm going to get a few of my friends together. We're going to put backpacks on, and we're going to deliver this very quickly, this ice cream. What we discuss and we understand is ice cream is going to melt in our backpacks, guys. It's not going to work. What are we really about? Well, we're about making people comfortable on a hot day with a refreshment. Well, what else can we do? How about some flavored water, really ice cold? We can freeze them up and they can last. So we're going to do flavored water refreshments, and we could totally do this. We could totally do this within a confined space, let's say a park. So let's choose a park where a lot of people go this weekend. It's going to be hot, and we could totally deliver this with 3 bikes if people message us. Well, how are they going to know? So we're going to do some marketing. We're going to test our marketing message. We're going to put our marketing. We're going to choose a location. We're going to put this in all the entrances. We're going to make a sign. We're going to say instant ice water, instant flavored ice water. Put a number there or your WeChat address or something, and say if you send us a message water, we'll get water to you in 2 minutes, right? And our first marketing message is instant ice water, SMS water. So this is our minimal viable product. I could totally do this in 2 weeks. I could set up my chat channel on Facebook or WeChat or WhatsApp or iMessage, and I'm off and running, right? Got my friends, we got some water, we're ready to go. So what are we really testing here? Well, at the end of this, did we sell anything? Did people understand the ad message? Did we choose the right location? Bottom line, did we serve a customer need, right? It's not drones with ice cream, it's instant refreshment. So we're testing different things here, including marketing, including our operations, including our core product, and how people, the channel that we reach them at, right? So you're testing your business very quickly, right? And this is not the end result of your business, but it's one step to get there, right? Further along, not a minimal viable product anymore, but your iteration might look like I'm testing my app that's going to deliver wine or coffee. The distribution is through a truck, and we're delivering it not to people, but to these mobile kiosks that we bike around and place in different parts of the city, especially during large events. And our question might be, well, are people ordering the dark roast or the light roast? Is a truck or a motorcycle a better way to go? And then we're testing Amazon Alexa integration. When people sort of talk to their Alexa machine, does that, our software development, does that work? And are people using voice activated ordering? So this is that process where your first sprint through here, or maybe it takes a couple sprints, so it's actually a 3 month before you get to your MVP, and that's maybe 6 sprints. But what you're really looking at is to touch the customer very quickly. So building a minimal viable product is one of the first steps. So let's look at this portion called data, right? So we've got our idea, we built a product, an MVP, and now we're collecting data, right? So at this point, we are measuring and collecting data, and then we're going to learn from what we get from that data, right? So what are we learning here? Well, we could be asking ourselves several questions, and we could be answering some of those questions with our data. Like, did we sell anything? How much? If we didn't have a specific product that we are selling yet, did the customer place an order? We might just have something on a piece of paper, and the customer says, yeah, I'd order that, right? And I'll give you a deposit. If you have multiple products or options, well, what product sold best, right? If it's ice cream, did they order strawberry flavor or was it vanilla? If there is some technology involved, like an app or a website, it's fantastic because you can collect all kinds of data, right? There is your visitors, your monthly active users, MAU. There's retention. You could take a look at whether or not over time that people are coming back or they're bouncing out. Basically, you're measuring engagement. How engaged are they with your app or with your website? There's a lot of great tools for this. The other things you might be looking at besides the product itself is your business and operations, right? Did we choose the right location? Maybe in our next iteration we got to move. Maybe it's a marketing message, right? We said instant ice water. Who cares about ice water? Maybe that's something that needs to change in this next iteration. Was your business model effective? Maybe you need to change your business model. Maybe, and that affects your marketing message. Maybe you have a big sign that says free water. Text us, and they get free water with the purchase of another beverage or something like that. So you could test your business model. So there's all kinds of things, and what essentially you are is collecting real data, right? Not an opinion, but data. How much did you sell, and taking that and applying that to what you will build in your next iteration. Now, what about a different sort of data? For example, feedback from mentors or peers. And this specifically in the context of young outliers speed dating, right? You might have gotten some feedback directly from some mentors that have taken that you've pitched to, that you've shared your idea with. And they could come from different places. Someone might say, hey, try a different material for your product. I think aluminum is what you should use for your product. Someone say, hey, your marketing message, your product is okay, but your marketing message, you're not really convincing me with that, or not telling me the right story. Your product is really A, but you're telling me a story B. Someone might say, hey, you know what, your problem is not the product or marketing message. It's really your Android app. Your iOS looks okay, but your Android app, most people are on Android. You got to be an Android, and your Android app looks not so great. Um, and you might be confused. You're like, hey, I'm getting all this different feedback. I'm totally confused here. What you should do is understand the context of all these, right? You're getting advice, and it might look like they conflict, but actually they might be complementary, and you don't necessarily have to do them all at once. And finally, there's a process by which you can validate whether or not these make sense at this time. In context, you might want to take a look at who these people are, right? One might be a product designer, marketing director. This guy might be an engineer who's a mobile developer. And what you should understand is they're all speaking from their background and from their level of expertise. That they're not really in conflict, but they are speaking to different parts of what you can do to help your startup along. So what process are you in, right? You've shared your product, a prototype or message or pitch, and you're collecting feedback. You could take that feedback and apply some of it into your next iteration, right? So maybe let's try a different marketing message. Let's tweak it a little bit. If you can, maybe change some material, but it might not be this iteration. Android app, you might think to yourself, well, that might take some time. But what you're doing is taking that, building it to your next iteration, and validating whether or not that's true or false. And it might not be true right away. It might be true in a further iteration or later on. In fact, your Android app, like I said, might take 3 months. So it's actually, we're going to put that on our roadmap. You can say, hey, that's a great idea. It's going to take us a few sprints, but it's in our roadmap. So in 3 months, we're going to have that. So putting on your roadmap essentially means, thank you, mobile engineer. I'm going to write a note for it, and I'm going to save that for later. How you should respond is one, and you'll probably hear this from other mentors, is to say thank you, right? Thanks for that advice. But it's a really great opportunity for you to connect with someone, right? You can say, hey, could I follow up with you later about that, right? Beyond any specific advice that you're getting right now in a short amount of time, you could use that opportunity to create a relationship. Perfect opportunity to connect with someone who with more experience, get their email, say, hey, we're going to try that marketing message. And can I email you later and tell you what the results were? I'm sure they'll say, hey, yeah, that'd be great, right? And what you're building is a long-term relationship here, right? That this person may or may not be helpful to you immediately, but this relationship will probably most likely be beneficial to you in the long term. So it's a great opportunity to connect with these experienced people. The one bit of advice I would caution on is if someone says your idea will never work because of whatever, don't take that like bad or incorrect or wrong or offensive. Just process it the same way. Well, what won't work about it, right? And then take that and see whether or not it applies in your next iteration and validate whether or not that's true or false, right? So that's one way to process data, whether or not it's data that you're getting from sales or whether or not it's advice that you're getting from experienced people. Okay, so we've gone through this process. We built, we're measuring, we're learning, and you've completed a cycle through here. And let's say that's a 1.0, right? Well, what do you do at this point? Well, we talked about taking what you learn and building to the next iteration and going through this loop. And that this iteration becomes a 1.1, 1.2, and each step of the way you're testing different things. Hopefully you're building on what you've learned, and hopefully your product is showing that in some places it's working and what we need to adapt and change. You get to a 2.0 and maybe you've changed some things that are fairly major but still along the same lines, and you go through that iteration. You're not selling ice cream anymore, you're selling ice cold beverages maybe, and you keep going and you're getting really good at this whole agile development process, whole lean startup, and you're iterating and you're learning, you're touching customers, you're understanding a few things, and let's say you're at a 5.6 version. And you've been looking at the data all along, but you take a really careful look at this point. Maybe you're running out of money, or maybe you're getting a little tired, or maybe you're just getting some really good data now, right? And you look at your data, and what you're learning is maybe you're starting to conclude something that, you know what, this is not working. Something's not working here, right? This whole idea of giving people ice cream or ice cold water or whatever it is on a hot day, on a cold day, on a rainy day, with bicycles, with cars, with trucks, and even drones. We managed after 6 months to launch our drones, and we're delivering ice cold beverages in a park through a drone. with our great app. It's just not working. But your also data might show you something else as well, that there is this part of the business that people are really responding to, and that we are making some money here, um, and this is working, right? And it doesn't have to do with ice cream, but it has to do with that other part, that we are getting really good at shipping and delivery logistics, right? We're not really great with our own products, but there's other businesses there who are really, really enjoying the service that we provide them, right? And so um, this might be an interesting point to talk about whether or not we pivot, right? You might hear this word, and sometimes each iteration you're thinking about whether or not you persevere or you pivot, right? Um, so what is a pivot, right? This could be a point where you say, hey, we're going from a business that made ice cream and made its own ice cream or flavored drinks and gave it to customers, where we don't want to even touch the customer. We just want to ship to these other businesses. And it's so different that it's not a 6.0, it's actually a 1.0, right? This is something else. So not to take this lightly as another iteration, but this is something different, right? And let me give you some examples, some real world startup difference here. There once was a company that made an MMO, massive multiplayer online game. This was their vision. They wanted to create an MMO. It was called Never Ending. And within this game called Never Ending, that people can have pictures and exchange them with other players. What they realized after several iterations, that people didn't really care about the MMO. What they were really getting traction was this photo sharing part. People wanted to post and share photos. They pivoted and became Flickr. And you don't go in Flickr and play some MMO. You're strictly just exchanging pictures. That's a pivot. And if you look at a lot of companies, you'll see this over and over again, especially here in Silicon Valley. Um, there was a company that was interested in social activism, right? And they had a site called thepoint.com. Different zigs and zags, and they became a company called Groupon. And I don't associate Groupon with anything about social activism, more about group purchases and bulk purchases, helping small businesses enhance their business and make more money. Um, it might not have to be with a company, but an individual, right? There was a guy who was really interested in podcast sharing. Started a company called Audio. Learned from that experience, and eventually created a company called Twitter from that experience, right? Much bigger, much more interesting. So that's a pivot. Not to overuse it with another iteration, but really something different. So you should really keep your eye on this, where the zigs and zags and keeping through this agile development process really may lead you to a pivot, and you should be open to that. So the last thing I want to talk about is not necessarily about this process, but who you go through this process with, and your team, basically, right? So you're going round and round through this iterative process, and there may just be you at the moment, right? And you realize, well, it can't just be me. I need to scale this, and I can't do everything. Sometimes when people start recruiting or looking for people, they wish, like, oh, I wish there was another me, because if there was another me, we can get more work done. That's usually not a good way to go. One, because it's impossible, but two, um, think a little smarter about this, right? What you want to find is people that are actually better than you, right? And some people have trouble with this, but what you want to do is raise the average of your company. If you hire someone who's not as good as you, but you could order around, well, that is lowering the IQ of your company, right? If you find someone that's better than you, you're actually raising the intelligence of your company. Always look for people who are better than you at something, right? Maybe it's a better engineer, better product developer, maybe better at sales. Another thing, when you're looking for additional people, look for a balance of EQ and IQ, right? IQ, everyone knows, intelligence. EQ, that emotional side. Sometimes you just pick someone because they're smart, but if they're abrasive, if they're negative, if they're cutting, if they're undermining, if they always say, "Ah, this will never work," and I'll give you 10 reasons why. Um, that's usually someone that might not be compatible with. And the other thing you might want to do is look for complementary skills, right? You may be good at a product, but you're not so good at engineering, or you're an introvert and you really need someone who's more extroverted and loves to talk about products, and you don't. Being able to share that. At one point, you did everything, right? You were product, you were tech, you were sales, but finding someone with complementary skills becomes something that you're going to need to do well. The one way you could do this is to approach your journey as always be recruiting, right? Your entrepreneurial journey is you're always recruiting, whether or not you have a job opening or you're looking for someone specific, that the people that you encounter in life are people that may work with you down the road, or you may work with them. The people around you today, or maybe tomorrow, or a year from now, or 10 years from now, that you're building these relationships. So you're always looking for great people, and the right opportunities sort of bring them in. Now, this skill of finding people, it's sort of a learned aspect. So you may not be good at it initially. As you go through life, you get better at sort of understanding different needs of people, and working with them. And you are also maturing over time. So I think it's okay to find people around you that you could work with, and learn from that experience. You may blow up a few companies making the wrong decision, but that's a learning process as well. Finding the right co-founders, it's a lifelong skill that you'll continuously train yourself on. But your co-founders are really going to be very important through this process. Another thing to think about your team is not just think about the guys who are going to be like your programmer coder, but people that you may lean on for advice. And even the people around you right now who are going through this program, there might be a co-founder within that, or maybe just someone who's going to start another company, but that you could lean on for advice. And these mentors that you've sort of seen and encountered through this process, those could be part of your team, not directly your CTO or something like that, but as an advisor. So relationships are important to this whole process. And there's something I used to always say from the beginning of my first startup, which is I learned hardware's hardware, software's software. It's the people that count. And that's something that I've carried with me through 20 years all over the world. Is it's the people that count. It's the customers, it's who you are, who your co-founders are, whether or not you could persevere through difficult times. Keep that in mind as you go through your journey. You're just getting started, so have fun, and remember, bringing value to your customers as well as everyone who's around you at this very moment.